The setting for tonight's bedtime story is a tiny Greek island in the sparkling Ionian Sea. That expanse of blue water that swirls below the sole of the boot of Italy and stretches across to the east, to the ancient land of Greece. So, get yourself comfortable and ready for a sound and relaxing sleep. For this story is designed to take your mind off of the day, far away from any worries or stresses that you may be carrying, and relax you. Relax you deeply so that sleep can come and find you. All you have to do is take a few long, slow, deep breaths into your lungs and let them out just as slowly, slower even, and feel your body grow lighter and lighter as it sinks into your comfortable resting place. And we will begin. The ancient Greek poet and historian Homer once wrote of a quiet little island nestled next to the Peloponnese Peninsula. Just a few lines amongst the many verses of his epic poems. Of an island that largely went unnoticed throughout the millennia as it basked in the Mediterranean sun. He described it as an island full of thickly wooded forests, with hidden sea caves and spectacular cliffs. And he spoke of it only briefly, for it is a tucked away part of the world, where one can imagine the days rolling into the next in a long succession of peaceful quietude. As the legends go, the island was named after Zakynthos, grandson of Zeus and Electra, and the son of Dardanos, who was the founder of Troy. And the island was a favourite place of Artemis, the strong and beautiful goddess of the hunt and protector of the wilderness. And it is said that she used to wander and roam the green woods, the sun glinting off her golden bow and arrows. And if one were lucky enough, they might chance to hear the heavenly music of her twin brother Apollo, as he would oft play his lyre under the refreshing shade of the bay trees, enchanting the island to make it even more beautiful. Eventually, the age of gods and myths receded into the lost epochs of forgotten time, but the island endured. It slumbered as the millennia passed, until it came to the attention of the venerable and well-travelled Phoenicians during the flourishing of the European Renaissance. They called it the Flower of the East, and the island became a preferred destination for Venetian nobility looking for a sojourn into the wild yet welcoming Greek nature. It was during this time that the island also came to be called Zante, and for the remainder of tonight's bedtime story, we will call it thus. We will follow a young couple of today's world as they discover the island and its charms for themselves. as they tread where Artemis once roamed and fall under the spell of Apollo's enchantment. In Zante, the flower of the East. Katie extended her arms above her head in a satisfyingly long stretch and leaned back in her wooden chair, pointing her toes and letting out a little whimper of satisfaction as the deliciousness of the stretch overcame her. "Feeling good?" asked her husband Jack. So good," she replied with a sigh. "Ah, what could be better? The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and we're here at this quaint little cafe, about to enjoy a rich, tasty Greek coffee." And with that, she put her face over her cup and inhaled deeply of the aroma that was swirling up and out of the dark brew. "And, if I'm not mistaken, my darling husband is about to tell me what he has planned for us this day," she said, looking up with a wink. "Well, I think I'd rather show you," he chuckled. The two of them were on their European dream vacation and had arrived in Zante on a bit of a whim. They had been desiring some peace and tranquility after exploring the big and beautiful cities of the continent. They certainly had loved their time in Paris and Rome, but after some weeks in an urban environment, they were left with a longing for something smaller. Somewhere they could get off the beaten track and get lost in nature and amble about the countryside. Somewhere they could go for a swim and soak in the sun and breathe in the fresh air. Somewhere like Zante. They had never heard of Zante before, but Katie had come across a photo of a small and remote beach while reading European travel blogs and looking for inspiration for their next stop. It was a photo of a tiny little beach that was surrounded on all sides by dramatic limestone cliffs that lifted straight out of a calm bay of water, so blue and clear that you could see right to the bottom. The cliffs encircled the beach, protecting it, stretching out into the sea like long, slender fingers, and an old shipwrecked hull jutted up and out of the sugar-fine white sand, adding a touch of intrigue and mystery to the scene. "Oh, let's go here," she had said to her husband, showing him the photo. "Wow, that is beautiful," he replied. "Where is it?" "I'm actually not sure," she laughed. "I hadn't looked yet. I was so captivated by the photo. But I just know that this is the next place we should go." Jack smiled and took a peek at the location. He was intrigued. He hadn't heard of Zante before, but after a bit of investigation, it seemed absolutely perfect for them at this point in their trip. "I have an idea," he said. "How about we make a deal? I'll do all the planning for this part of the trip, and that way you can be swept along in a state of surprise, and the secrets of the place can unveil themselves to you one by one." "Oh, that sounds so lovely," she replied. "It's a deal." And so, with big grins on their faces, they shook hands ceremoniously to seal the deal. "Okay, but the one thing you do have to know," he continued, "is we're going to Greece. to an island in the sun. And so, after a short travel from Italy, here they were now in Zante, sipping coffee and ready to take in all that the island had to offer. And Katie was truly excited, for she knew Jack had planned a special excursion for them today, his surprise gift for her. And all she had to do was come along and enjoy, and let the day unfold. She loved that idea and smiled at the thought of her husband doing his secret research to plan the trip. When they had finished their coffees, he looked across the table at her smiling face. "Ready to go?" he asked. "Go where?" she responded with a mischievous grin. "You'll see," he chuckled. "Come on, I rented a car. Let's go out and into this beautiful day together." With the windows down and the fresh island air streaming in, the two of them rolled out of Zakynthos town on the southern coast, heading north and into the quiet of the island. This was one of those drives where the speed almost couldn't be too slow, for they certainly weren't in a rush. And what good would it be if the stunning scenery streamed by too fast to take it all in? Katie stuck her head out the open window, letting the wind catch her long blonde hair, sending it streaming back where it could catch the sun. Eyes closed, birds singing. They were quickly out of town, and as they slowly started to climb in elevation along the narrow lanes that led them up and into the hills, the vegetation became more and more luscious, more and more green. They drove through the little wild forests of chestnut and shimmering plane trees, and past olive groves and orange and lemon trees, their branches heavily laden with big globes of fresh fruit. The smell of their blossoms filled the air. They spotted a fig tree and stopped to pick a few of the sweet, syrupy treats. "These are heavenly," whispered Katie between bites. Even the sides of the road and the stone walls that lined them were covered in green plants that seemed to spill out from everywhere. They were in unspoilt Zakynthos. "This is so incredibly wonderful," Katie said as they slowly passed a field of bright yellow sunflowers standing in tall, proud rows. "Just look at all the natural beauty everywhere. This is exactly what we needed, peaceful and relaxing. No traffic, no noise, no crowds, just perfect. And it all feels so free to explore the island like this, at whatever speed we want." Jack smiled. They certainly had left any busyness far behind them now, and were firmly ensconced in the gently undulating central plain of the island, a delightful tapestry of all the varying green hues that merged together to create a decidedly therapeutic effect on their well-being. As they continued on, they passed tranquil-looking vineyards with long rows of grapes hanging delicately in fat bunches, ready to be harvested and made into delicious wine, and vegetable patches full of sprouting carrots, cucumbers, and tomatoes, and all manner of delicious greens, and the occasional villa sitting comfortably in the pastoral and fertile landscape. They drove on, slowly, taking it all in, past lush green meadows, carpeted with bright bursts of chicories, daisies, and poppies. It felt like they had stumbled into a dream world, a natural paradise, and it gave them a feeling of complete rejuvenation. As they slowly meandered up and into the hills, the little lane they were following began to narrow, and they entered a tiny valley where an old mountain village was sitting comfortably, nestled into the gentle slopes as it had done for hundreds of years. Olive groves, vineyards, and open countryside were happily boxing it in on all four sides. "This is such a beautiful place," murmured Katie, peering intently out the open window. "Just look at all those beautiful old homes, all surrounded by such greenery." "Where are we now?" "It's an old village called Tragaki," he replied. "We're going to stop and have a little look around here and pick up some food for a picnic. I know a place," he said, with a wink. "Oh, that sounds ever so lovely," she purred. So they parked the car to the side of the lane, careful to avoid the wild flowers that were sprouting there, spreading their splashes of bright colour amongst the green. And as they stepped out and into the quiet mountain ambience, it hit them. They were truly away from it all. The gentle silence that was almost thick enough to feel was punctuated only by the soft chirping of birds that were busy flitting about happily, stopping only long enough to say a hello to their fellow flyers before lifting off again. And a light breeze gently rustled the leaves of the high-reaching trees that stood all around them. It was a peaceful sound, and they could literally feel that time was slower here. They were at ease, perfectly content, perfectly relaxed. They both sighed involuntarily from the overwhelming feeling of well-being. "Shall we?" he said, offering his hand. Katie slipped her hand in his, and they started to make their way slowly up and into the dainty little village, the gravel crunching softly under their feet. The village was cozied into the hillside with old stone walls separating the flower-draped jumble of shutter-fronted villas. Little cobblestoned alleyways led hither and thither. They sauntered along, relishing the fresh mountain air and wrapped in that feeling of complete freedom. There was nowhere they had to be but here, and there was nothing they had to do but enjoy the moments, one by one, as they passed. Katie stopped and took a deep breath to centre herself. A nice, long inhale into her lungs that she let escape ever so slowly. "It's so peaceful here and fresh," she murmured. "And this mountain air is delicious." "It really is, isn't it?" he replied. Exactly what we needed. Come on over here. It's just up this hill. What's up this hill? She asked, slyly. You'll see, he responded. And so, they followed the little stone path that took them up the main hill, and after a short climb, they soon crested the top. There they found an old monastery, standing silently watching, and a lookout with tremendous views of the surrounding countryside and the sparkling blue sea way down below. Katie gasped, for the view was spectacular. The greens and yellows of the countryside eventually merged with the coastline as it curved its way north and south before falling off into the multitude of blues that formed the sea below. Calm little bays sat tranquilly, framed by the white of their sandy beaches. From their vantage point, all was serene, just slightly shimmering in the light of the sun. They stayed a while, soaking it all in, letting the peace of the moment wash over them and fill them with a deepening sense of ease. And after some time had passed, Jack whispered, I think it's time to go get our picnic. Oh, yes, Katie replied. Let's. And so they quietly pulled themselves away from the view and scampered gingerly back down the hill. I think it's this way, said Jack, as he led them along a narrow lane that wound through the village. They soon came to a very old and very tall, ivy-covered stone wall with a high archway and cherry-coloured bougainvillea spilling over the top. It was an old family-run taverna that offered promises of delicious traditional Greek food. They walked through the thick stone archway and were amazed at what they saw on the other side. A little patio opened up, surrounded on 3 sides by tall, green trees that were really just the edges of a small, friendly forest that spread out from there. It was like a little oasis in the middle of a secret wood. The patio was filled with tables topped with colourful red and white checkered cloths. Potted flowers were placed everywhere, filling the space with bursts of pink and red and white blossoms. Grapevines had been trained to grow on a trellis above the patio, offering shade with dashes of dappled sunlight that danced and shimmered. They were the only ones there. They walked onto the patio and were greeted by a warm and friendly man who came out of the adjoining building, beaming a big smile. As he placed a vase of fresh flowers on a nearby table and motioned for them to sit down. He had a black pipe firmly fixed to the side of his mouth, and an old captain's hat on his head that was sitting on a jaunty angle. There was a twinkle in his eye, the kind that indicated an abundance of joie de vivre. They sat down, and Katie watched with considerable surprise as her husband began speaking a few words of Greek to the old man, who was just as equally surprised as she was. "Since when did you speak Greek, my dear?" she asked. "Since last night, when I learned how to say, 'We would like to have a picnic,'" he chuckled. "Just a few choice words to make sure we get just what we want. And I have a backup here," he said, showing her a paper with a list of phrases and picnic items. He handed the list to the old man, who read it carefully before looking up with a big smile and then quickly disappearing into the kitchen. They sat back to enjoy the ambience and wait for their food. They noticed a backgammon board sitting unused and had just enough time to finish a game before the old man was back again. "For the lovely couple," he said in his broken English, handing them a little box full of tasty delights. They thanked him heartily, and he tipped his hat to wish them well. And with that, they left the taverna, back out through the archway, and made their way down the hill. Their little car was waiting happily for them to whisk them off to their next stop. This basket of food smells so good," said Katie. "What did you order for us?" "Well, I could tell you now, or we could wait just a little bit longer to see and sample," replied her husband. "What do you say we go work up an appetite with a bit of a swim? It's just a little further north to the Blue Caves." "Oh my, that sounds interesting. I can't wait," she replied, squirming in her seat. As they continued their short drive north, the road took them back onto the coast, where it began to curve and undulate quite dramatically next to the steep coastline. The waves splashed up onto the rocks down below, and a sea breeze lifted up off the waters and in through their open windows, cooling them as they drove. After a short drive, they stopped the car next to an old mill and stepped back out into the full and glorious sunshine. "Most people take a boat to swim in these caves," said Katie's husband, "but I read about a long stairway that descends from here to the water. It's just 100 steps. You ready for a little adventure?" Katie nodded and smiled a big smile. And so, the two of them started down the stone staircase, one step at a time, the breeze licking at them as they went. It soon brought them to the edge of the sea, where some large flat stones sat waiting, perfect for their soon-to-be picnic. The water was calm here, inviting them. "I can't believe how brilliantly blue and clear this water is," said Katie. "It almost looks unreal." "It's incredible, isn't it?" replied Jack. "And I've read the caves are even more vibrantly blue. Let's dive in." And so, the two of them slipped into their bathing suits and splashed into the water and swam their way over to the limestone arches that lined the cliffside like Gothic flying buttresses. As they passed underneath and into the caves, the light turned the water into an electric colour of blue, and it coloured them too. "Look how the blue transfers onto us too. That's amazing." They continued to tread water and dive below, mesmerised by the ethereal effect of the light on the water. Stalactites hung like chandeliers from the top of the cave, slowly growing drip by drip over the centuries. After some time floating on their backs and enjoying the magic of the cave, the call of the picnic began to grow a little louder in Katie's stomach. "I'm getting hungry. How about you?" Katie asked. "I can't wait. Let's go eat," he responded, That picnic basket is calling to me too. And so they swam back to the rocks and warmed themselves in the Mediterranean sunshine as they unpacked the goodies from the basket. Jack laid out a cloth that he had brought and started placing the items on it one by one. Of course, we couldn't have a Greek meal without the classic dips, he said, creating a delicious buffet on the blankets. Tzatziki, aubergine and fava. I know tzatziki, she said. I love that tasty mix of yogurt, dill, cucumber and garlic. But what's fava? I think you'll like this one too, he responded. It's a creamy split pea puree. And here's the pita bread to go with it. She tore off a piece of the light bread and took a hearty dip of the fava. This is delicious. And the pita is still warm. And here's the Greek salad too, he said, as he put it out in front of them. The tomatoes are almost glowing red. They're so fresh, she said, plunking one into her mouth. Oh my, these are good. And look how big and plump the olives are. And so, the two ate happily, crunching into crisp, water-rich pieces of cucumber and salty cubes of feta cheese. Katie took a bite out of a fresh dolmade that her husband handed her, a grape leaf stuffed with rice, finely chopped pine nuts, parsley and onion. They sat there in the sun on the rocks, enjoying their Greek picnic as the water lapped at their dangling feet. I hope you have room for dessert. I'm told that this is the quintessential Greek food experience, he said as he handed her a sticky treat. Is this baklava? Sure is. Katie bit into the syrupy, rich treat, her eyes rolling back as the flavours overwhelmed her taste buds. You have to try this, she said, plopping a piece of the buttery dessert into his open mouth. It clearly hit the spot. Next time, let's start with dessert, he said, between munches of deep satisfaction. And, we've really only broken the surface of the delicious Greek food we can eat on the island. Perhaps for dinner, we can try souvlaki or gyro or moussaka. Was all she could muster as she lay on her back in the sunshine, her belly full, content, happy. The two of them drowsed like this, just listening to the subtle splash of the water and the hum of the cicadas off in the distance, resting. And after a while, Jack said in a deeply relaxed voice, "Well, it's already been an amazing day, but I do have something else planned for us, my love." Katie cracked a curious eye and leaned up on her elbow to listen. I was thinking our trip to the island just wouldn't be complete without a look at the beach that drew us here initially. You remember the photo? Well, it's actually just another short drive away to the lookout where we can get the exact same views. You ready to go? Yes, let's go. So, the two of them packed up their things and began the climb back up the stairway to the top of the cliffside to their car. After a short drive west, They came to the lookout and parked and got out to have a look at the famous Navajo shipwreck beach. Wow, it is so beautiful, isn't it? Just look at that. The view of the beach was stunning. It was the same spectacular angle as the one they'd seen in the photo. The limestone cliffs stretched out into the ever-clear water, protecting the white sand of the beach with the old shipwreck sticking up out of it. But what the photo couldn't capture was the slowly rolling waves that gently made their way home on the beach after their long journey from deep at sea, and of the pleasant breeze that blew through their hair in a soft delight and lifted the seabirds up and away, gently cawing their pleasure, and of the peacefulness of the view as they stood there up on the cliff, mesmerized. They took their fill of the view and snapped some pictures of their own, marveling at the experience of being there. It almost makes you wonder about the legends. Which legends? Asked Katie. About the god Apollo, and how he enchanted the island with his music to make it more beautiful. Well, whatever he did, it certainly worked, she laughed. The drive back south took them through the occasional old village, surrounded by dense forests and endless countryside. They drove on in a blissful silence, just enjoying the enchantment of the island. Eventually, Jack broke the silence. The day wouldn't be complete without a sunset, would it now? And it just so happens I know a place, he said with a wink. They were nearly at Kerry, on the southwestern side of the island, which is all cliffs, perfect for cozying up to watch the sun come down over the water. They were able to drive right close to the edge near a patch of grass where they laid their blanket and stretched out to enjoy the show. The sun was still a massive orange globe nearing the horizon, and the colours were just starting to fill the sky. A soft pink at first, that was busy tinting the clouds and softening the light. As the sun continued to descend, the pinks slowly started making way for deeper shades of reds and oranges, and it soon seemed as if the sky was on fire. The colours were mirrored in the vast sea below, creating the kind of effect that has to be seen to truly understand how beautiful it actually is. Words can only come so close. The two sat there, lost in the beauty of the moment, curled up into one another, entwined and comfortable. Tomorrow it's my turn, said Katie in a very sleepy voice. I'm taking you to Turtle Island. Hey, how do you know about Turtle Island? You must have peeked and read about it here. Just a little bit, she replied. I couldn't let you have all the fun. And she tilted her head back and let out a little laugh, quickly followed by a big yawn. Well, I accept, said Jack, chuckling, and he wrapped his arms around her a little tighter and they watched the purples and deeper shades of blue come out as the night sky began to make its way onto the stage. And they sat like that, slowly getting sleepy, just as you should be. For it's time to sleep now, dear listener, to completely let go of the day and let sleep come take you off for a deep and thorough rest. Sleep now. Good night.